All right, everyone. So I want to talk to you guys about a subject that I find super, super fascinating, but which I haven't really gotten into super detail on, and that is the Roman-Jewish War. I recently started reading Josephus's book on the Roman-Jewish War. I told myself that I would not read it because it is super, super long. It is a very long book. But here I am. And I recently started reading it. I must say I am not disappointed because it is a very well written and detailed book. Josephus's account on the Roman-Jewish War is really our main source of information when researching into the conflict. But I want to talk to you guys about the source of the conflict so that we can have really a better understanding as to how the war began. And I believe that by understanding this, we can actually have a bit more of an in-depth understanding of the type of political atmosphere and really chaotic atmosphere that Christ was living in and that Christ was actually trying to combat. The Roman-Jewish War really began as an ethnic conflict. It was an ethnic conflict. The Jewish leaders, I don't want to say the Jews because it's too much of a general statement. And when I actually began reading Josephus's book, one thing that I quickly picked up on is that a lot of the Jews really didn't even agree with revolting against the Roman Empire. There was enough Jews to start a revolution, but there were a good amount of Jews within the leadership of Judea who really did not want a conflict with Rome because they understood that it would mean the destruction of Judea and of Jerusalem and of the temple. They understood these things. But the war, it began with racism. I'm pretty sure you have never heard this because the most common description or the most common narrative in regards to the Roman-Jewish War goes something like this. The Jews revolted, they wanted a Jewish state, and the Jews lost, and the Romans destroyed the temple. That's pretty much what we were told in Sunday school, in church. This is the typical narrative that you'll hear even in History Channel, which really isn't about history anymore. It's all about, finding logs and aliens and finding gold somewhere in Chile or Peru. It's not even about history any longer. But that's the superficial narrative that everyone has heard. And one thing that I don't like when it comes to reading history is superficial narratives. For example, people talk about the Seleucids, and they say, well, the Seleucids invaded Judea and they destroyed the temple, or they sacked the temple and they desecrated the altar. And this is what people usually learn when they hear about the Maccabean revolt. And I heard that story so many times that I just got tired of it because I know that when it comes to reality, one thing that is never true is a superficial narrative. That's never true. There's always a whole bunch of details that people skip out on, that people aren't really interested in, and people just want to hear the quick story. They want the Cliff Notes version or the Pink Monkey version of the story, and I don't like that. So years ago, I started reading the book of Maccabees, and then I read the second book of Maccabees, and then I read the third one. And so I have a lot more knowledge within myself on that subject than what the narrative, what the usual narrative contains. So the same thing goes with the Roman-Jewish War. For years I've heard the typical story: Jews revolted, they had a war, Romans sacked the temple. Okay, whatever. And I'm like, I really want to learn this stuff. So I started reading Josephus's book. I'm a very slow reader. I'm not a fast reader. So it's going to take me some time to complete it. It is a long and arduous read, but where there is a will, there is a way. And I most definitely have the will to read this wonderful work of literature. So the Roman-Jewish War. So let's go back a little bit before the outbreak of the actual conflict, what was taking place. There was a tremendous buildup of tension between the Roman Empire and the Jewish leadership, and this was going on for a long time. It was going on for a number of years. And it was gradually brewing and stirring and stirring and stirring and stirring. So I can't get into all the details because I can't remember all of it in this noggin. But nonetheless, within my limited capacity, I will try to tell you what I do remember from reading it. Because one thing I don't want to do is sit there and like follow a script. That's the worst thing to do. I want to give you guys enough knowledge to get you guys interested in it. And then you guys can research it for yourselves and learn some more. I'm here just to help you, get interested in this subject because I think it is very important. So there was in Judea, the procurator of Judea, his name was Gessius Florus. Gessius Florus was appointed by the Roman government to be something of a ruler in Judea right next to Herod Agrippa. Herod Agrippa was sort of the Jewish representation of the government, but Gessius Florus was there to be the actual immediate Roman representative of Roman power. But here's the thing: Gessius Florus really didn't like the Jews. He didn't particularly favor them, and he enjoyed trolling them. Gessius Florus was a giant political troll to the most destructive example and condition you can think of. Gessius Florus would do things to purposefully piss off the Jews. Now, why would he do this? Gessius Florus was the thief. Gessius Florus supported bands of Greek marauders who would go around killing Jews and stealing their property. And Gessius Florus supported this, and he allowed it because he made a deal with the bandits that he would get a cut out of all of the things that they stole. So he was a thief. He was a professional thief within the government. Now, before this sort of thing was taking place, there was other events that occurred. You had, this was taking place in the midst of political chaos, political turbulency that was very, very destructive and violent. For one, you also had Jewish marauders. It was really lawless. Judea was not a very orderly place. It was the Wild West. It was lawless. It was dystopian. It was anarchist. You had bands of marauding Jews who were going around murdering people. They were murdering wealthy people. They were murdering high-level Romans and aristocrats. They were murdering these elite people, taking their stuff, stealing, killing innocent people. And then on top of that, you also had the Sicarii. The Sicarii were Jewish assassins who would go around murdering Romans and murdering Roman officials. The word Sicarii is Latin. It means dagger. The Spanish word sicario comes from this very word, but in the Mexican context or the Spanish context, sicario means assassin. If you study anything about Mexican narcos and cartels, the word sicario comes up pretty frequently. So you had all this turbulency taking place, lots of political violence done by Jewish terrorists. You had a lot of really random acts of violence done by Jewish bandits. And then you also had the controversy over the town of Caesarea, or Caesarea, depending on how you pronounce it. Caesarea was a town that was built by Herod the Great. And it was inhabited by both Jews and Gentiles. And by Gentiles, I mean specifically ethnic Greeks who were living there. The Jews began to claim that Caesarea belonged to them because Caesarea was built by a Jew. Herod the Great was Jewish. Now, a little background on that. Herod the Great, if you actually study his ethnicity, ethnically speaking, he was actually Arab. If you were to bring Herod the Great to our own times, we would consider him a modern-day Jordanian. But Herod the Great had converted to Judaism, He had two wives, one who was an ethnic Arab woman. He also had a wife who was Jewish, and he had children from both of them. And there was a lot of conflict between them as well. One of his sons convinced Herod the Great to murder two of his sons. He had his father murder two of his brothers, Alexander and Aristobulus, and this was a huge controversy. Eventually, Herod the Great had his Arab son put to death. Yeah, it was pretty brutal, pretty crazy. So you had that was going on. And the Jews said, this town belongs to us because it was built by a Jewish king, a Jewish ruler. The Greeks said, no, we live in this land and we have, businesses and we earn our living and we live here. So who the hell are you to tell us to leave? And there was actually conflict that went on. There was an ethnic conflict between the Greeks and the Jews. The Jews murdered Greeks and they killed each other. There was a lot of conflict between the two, tensions between the two. You also had a lot of tension between Jews and members of the Roman military. There were a number of Roman soldiers who really, really hated the Jews. Gessius Florus trolled the Jews by saying, well, bring in the Jews out of the synagogue, and we'll bring in the Roman soldiers, and we'll have the Jews and the Roman soldiers salute each other. And this was supposed to be a way of maintaining peace and sort of reconciling the two people. But Gessius Florus told the Roman soldiers, what I want you to do, he told the Roman army in Judea, what I want you to do is when the Jews salute you, don't salute them back. Just to tick them off. And if the Jews begin to bicker, any sort of lip from those Jews, I give you the command to use your weapons. And those Roman soldiers really had itchy fingers. They wanted to grab the hilt of their swords and slaughter. So the Jews came out of the synagogue, and the rabbis said, hey, we need to reconcile peace with the Romans. Again, not all the Jews were interested in revolt and revolution. There were rabbis who said, let's maintain peace. So the rabbis understandably said, hey, let's maintain peace. We don't want revolution. We do not want a war with the Romans because we would be slaughtered. Let's go out and salute the soldiers. Let's go support the troops. So the Jews came out of the synagogue. The soldiers were there. They saluted the soldiers, and the soldiers did nothing. A number of the Jews got upset, understandably so. They bickered, they critiqued, they expressed their anger, their frustration, and the Roman soldiers pulled out their swords and made a great slaughter. A lot of these Roman soldiers were ethnically Syrians. And they didn't like each other. They slaughtered the Jews. They killed thousands of Jews in that one particular event, around 3,000 people, which is a hell of a lot of people. The Jews ran up to the rooftops, and they began to use slings to fire stones at the Roman soldiers and killed a number of them, and the Roman soldiers ran away. So there was a lot of ethnic tension that was taking place. You had marauders. I want to say they were Greek marauders going around killing Jews, stealing their property. Gessius Florus, the procurator, appointed by Rome to be a governor of Judea, taking a cut of the stolen stuff. You had Jewish bandits. You had the Sicarii, political terrorists who were murdering Roman officials. You had the ethnic tension between the Greeks and the Jews in Caesarea. You had the tension between the Roman soldiers and the Jews. A lot of stuff was taking place. In one event, there was a Gentile, I want to say he was a Roman soldier, who went right in front of a synagogue and began to sacrifice birds on an altar. Forced the Jews to leave the synagogue because the synagogue was declared unclean. All of these trolling events, be it the soldiers not saluting the Jews, be it the guy sacrificing the birds in front of the synagogue, all of these events were orchestrated by Gessius Florus. Now, why would Gessius Florus want to provoke the Jews to violence? The reason is because Gessius Florus was stealing in Judea, and he was worried that if Caesar ever found out, he would be executed. So what he began to do was contrive a plan by which to get the Jews to revolt against Rome so he could then declare the Jews the enemy and start a war between the government of Rome and Judea, thereby shifting the attention from him to Judea, and then he would get away with his thieving crimes. And it worked, actually. It really did. The provocations worked. Now, the Jews were very upset that Gessius Florus was doing these things. They were very upset about the fact that thousands of Judeans were killed, understandably so, and they were really seriously planning on starting a revolution. The king over Judea, Herod Agrippa, made a speech, a very long speech, which Josephus records, to the Jewish people. And in the speech, he begged the Jewish people not to agree to a revolution against the Roman government. And he stated that if you do a revolution, you would be slaughtered. And he makes some interesting statements. In one part of the speech, he says, look at the Greeks. The Greeks had this amazing empire, and yet they submit to Rome. Look at the Germans, how warlike and tall they are, and yet they submit to Rome. And then he asks the question, are you more warlike than the Germans? No. But yet the Germans, who put up more of a fight to the Romans than you, actually submit. If you can't defeat the Germans, you can't defeat the Romans. He says, look at the people of Gaul, how wealthy they are, how much happiness they bring to the world. And he actually says this about the Gauls. The Gauls are the French people. And I'm thinking like, wait, the ancient French were bringing happiness to all the world. Were they like exporting cheese at that point? I don't know. But he says, look at the people of Gaul, warlike people who posed a great struggle and challenge to Roman power, but yet the Gauls submit to Roman power. And yet you do not want to submit. You want to do this revolution, which is only going to cause tremendous amounts of suffering. And he says, you rely on the wall around Jerusalem. That's all you have your faith on. You have your faith on the wall. Well, that wall is going to go down. They're going to destroy you. And he said, all I ask is that you pay the taxes to the Roman government, give unto Caesar what belongs to Caesar, and I ask you, there was actually a connection that was built between the temple and a Roman building, and the Jews tore it down, and he said, all I ask is that you rebuild that connection between the Roman building and the Jewish temple. So the Jews began to pay their taxes. They began to give unto Caesar what belonged to Caesar, and they began to rebuild that connection between the Roman building and the Jewish temple. But Herod Agrippa would say something that really angered them. He said, also, submit yourselves to Gessius Florus. Ooh. And they say, we'll pay taxes, but we're not going to submit to that guy. So a number of the Jews began to organize a revolt, a revolution, and there was the governor of the Jewish temple. His name was Eleazar. He was the son of a man named Ananias, which really is Anani, which is actually still a common last name in the Middle East. And Eleazar, he began to foment revolt. And what he did was he decreed that no foreigner would be allowed to make a sacrifice in the temple. No foreigner. That would include the Romans. That would include the Caesar himself. Now, it was customary for the Jews to make a sacrifice for the sake of Caesar. This was a way to maintain peace between the Caesar and the Jewish people, and it was also a diplomatic way on the part of the Romans to maintain peace with the Jews by respecting their religion, similarly to how George Bush said nice things about Islam. This was part of Roman foreign policy. The governor of the temple said, no more sacrifices for the Caesar. Foreigners are not allowed to enter. Non-Jews are not allowed to enter the temple. That was a declaration of war to the Caesar. And this was the beginning of the Roman-Jewish conflict. The Pharisees had gotten together, and they rejected the decree, the racist decree of Eleazar. You see, the Pharisees, we use Pharisee as a pejorative term now. The Pharisees were corrupt, but they were actually the least bad. The Sadducees were much more vicious. And the Pharisees, they rejected the decree of Eliezer, and they said, no, it has always been a custom that we allow foreigners to make sacrifices in the temple. It has always been a custom that we make a sacrifice for the sake of Caesar. We cannot simply throw away this custom. In fact, the Pharisees had made the argument that for a very long time, foreigners were allowed to make contributions to the temple. And the Pharisees said, they are things in this temple that were contributed to the temple by foreigners. So there is no issue. And Eliezer said, no, only Jews allowed, no non-Jews allowed. You reject the sacrifice of the Caesar. That's a declaration of war. That's sedition. So, what does this remind us of? Well, remember what Jesus was dealing with. This is what Jesus was combating. This is why I think it's so important to read about the Roman-Jewish War, because it's going to give you more of an insight as to what sort of world Jesus was living in, what sort of tension, what sort of political atmosphere was lingering about in the air during the life of Christ. What was Christ really dealing with? He was dealing with fanaticism. Christ was essentially living in a dystopian society. That's why I think he used the story of the Good Samaritan, because in that story, he talks about a man getting attacked by bandits and robbed and left for dead. Well, that sort of thing was happening leading up to the Roman-Jewish conflict. There was a lot of that was happening. It was basically the Book of Eli. It was Mad Max. It was dystopian. It was crazy. And Jesus saw the exploitation that was taking place in the temple. Where were the merchants selling stuff, selling doves? Where were the Jews having Roman currency exchanged for a temple currency? They were in the court of the Gentiles, where the non-Jews were allowed to make sacrifices, and they were exploiting the foreigners. And Jesus got so upset that he took up a whip and he kicked some ass. He got personal, he got martial, he got warlike, he got physical, because he was so upset about this. And what did Jesus say? My Father's house was made to be a house of prayer for all nations. And so he was combating the racism that transgressed against the intention of the temple, which was to be a house for all nations. And so there was racism that was in Judea, and Jesus tried to fight it. He warned them against this. He said, no, the temple is to be a home for all nations. They didn't listen. And what happened after the death of Christ? What happened after the murder of Christ? Eliezer, the governor of the temple, says, no non-Jews allowed. What Christ warned against, Eliezer supported. And what he supported, which was what Christ was combating, is what sparked the Roman-Jewish conflict. So what Christ tried to warn against by using the whip, that is what sparked the conflict between the Romans and the Jews. And I find that to be extremely fascinating. So, there's your lesson for today, guys. Chew on that. Research more on that. I'll be talking more about this as I learn interesting things from Josephus. You guys have just heard some theology. God bless.